Welcome to another Daugherty Roundtable Talk. Today we're going to be talking about modernizing your digital strategy. I'm Travis Duncan. I'm a principal consultant at Daugherty Business Solutions, and my role is focused around digital customer engagement, digital strategy, and user experience. And I'm joined with me today by a bunch of really great thought leaders at Daugherty that have a perspective within this space. So let me do some quick introductions, and then we'll launch into things. Let's start with Pramod.
Hello, great to be here. My name is Pramod Kirpara. I'm a principal enterprise solutions architect in Daugherty Business Solutions. Basically a technologist, IT strategist with experience in various domains like healthcare, finance, insurance, agriculture, etc. My passion is value-driven and result-oriented enterprise solution architecture and future-proofing digital strategy and digital backbone.
Excellent. Thanks, Pramod. And let's move on to Chris.
Hey, Chris Hayes here. Principal consultant at Daugherty also. Background is in user experience. Started my career as a web designer in the mid-90s, moved into interactive and then front-end development and then into research and strategy part for the last 10 or so years. So thanks for including me.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. And last but not least, we have Ashu.
Hey guys, Ashu Bhatia. So I'm with Daugherty and I lead their digital strategy and transformation practice. Background is done a lot of things within IT and kind of moved over to business to kind of be at the conduit of the two, if you will. The role generally entails doing a lot of the what and how, but these days a lot about the why and prioritizing clients' agenda around their investments in digital strategy. As we all know, everyone has been on this journey for quite some time. Some acceleration, of course, in this recent times for the pandemic. But at the end of the day, it's about what do you do first and why is what we help a lot of our clients, and very happy to be here.
Excellent, thanks. And thank you all for joining us. So let's go ahead and just get started. I believe it was Warren Buffett who made the famous quote, only when the tide goes out, you discover who's been swimming naked. And while that was intended to be focused on people making risky investments in the market, I think it's very applicable for what we've seen over the course of the last year in the digital space. With the COVID pandemic hitting a lot of organizations, there was a spotlight shined on a lot of organizations around their digital practices. There were, a number of organizations that were digitally native, that were able to respond rapidly and accelerate their growth. Just a few weeks ago, companies like Facebook and Apple announced profits that beat even some of the loftiest of Wall Street expectations. So digitally native companies responded in force. There was a grouping of organizations that had strategies in place but had not executed them, and they accelerated them and largely came out unscathed. And then there were groups of organizations that really weren't ready, weren't prepared, and some have suffered considerably as a result. Lots of small businesses that weren't ready, that didn't have digital front ends to their operations, and it created a ripple effect throughout the economy. So obviously it's been a problem with the tide going out as a result of the pandemic. But the reality is over the last few months, we're starting to see things shift back to some level of normalcy. The tide is coming back in. And the reality is, are we going to see organizations rest on their laurels, or is digital transformation and digital focus really going to continue to accelerate, or, what are we going to see? And so I think the first question that we really want to start with is, why digital, and are we going to see this continue post-pandemic?
Yeah. No, I think that's a good summary of what's going on. I think all our clients, us, and we're just in those waters, we're trying to swim right now. To your point, I think, the pandemic definitely made priorities kind of very clear for a lot of our clients, right? People are already doing some kind of digital, whether it's digitizing their back-end operations or being on the front end and kind of capturing the customer experience better. But I think to your point, what is digital, right? It's a digital transformation, digital strategy, such an overused term these days. I think if you boil it down, it actually just means two things, right? What are your customers buying, the what, and how they're buying. Those things are changing. And some of that is just because of the customer taste, the demographic, and some of that is almost mandated by the current times, right? So what they're buying and how they're buying entails all of digital work. And I think, as I mentioned, the clients that we work with, every company understands the importance of all this. There's examples that you said. There's complete digital native businesses like Uber or Airbnb with no real assets, very light assets, but then mostly on the digital front. And then there's some that are invested in legacy, right? The with banks or insurance companies that had tons and millions of dollars invested, and how they prioritize where to go and where they're playing, I think entails a little bit of understanding this ecosystem and prioritizing even further to understand what's going on in the current world and what their customers might demand.
Yeah, I think you see, to kind of track back to your question, Travis, will things go back to kind of the way they were or rest on their laurels? I think there's some things that are just changed forever right now. So one of those things being that delivery of all types of goods, including food and everything else, has been something that people have really grabbed onto when the pandemic hit. And even it's allowed, I think, a lot of the smaller businesses to stay afloat because of those all digital companies like Grubhub and things like that can pick up any kind of item and bring it to you. I think something like those things are going to be here to stay, and companies are going to rely on that. And then you also have the changing landscape just in our cities of companies no longer feeling like they have to hire people directly in their cities, and having access to a larger workforce and giving people the freedom to move around the country a little bit and not be strapped to, a specific city. So I think some of those things are definitely going to be here to stay. And I think what we're seeing too is, some of these, what we expect as customers are also, it's transforming, right? So now we expect things to be digital. We look at brands like Uber with not only changing how an entire industry works, but also changing or enlightening us on how a business model can work. Like as you said, they don't have any assets really. They don't own cars or taxis or anything like that. But that model of a dispersed workforce that can be on call at any time is something that, they were the first disruptor to kind of do that. But now you see it trickling over to the moving industry and other industries like that. So I think those new ways of thinking about how to solve not only consumer problems, but also business challenges are going to be prevalent over the next few years.
Great points. So putting all those points, summarizing it, and thinking from an enterprise solutioning perspective, a solution platform should be able to support constantly changing customer needs. It also must support business agility through innovations and continuous learning. So at the core of this is the ability to support value-based and time-sensitive user experience and customer experience needs.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that a lot too, and just the way we build solutions, right? So long gone are the days of, the installed server on your location. Everything's in the cloud, lightweight, scalable services that can be attached to any platform. So I think that is, those microservices and things like that can be spun up and adjust to any size are going to be really important.
Yeah. So it sounds like that supporting ecosystem is important. What I heard though is a theme throughout all of that is customer convenience, whether it be in work or in play. And I think that's one of the things that the pandemic may have accelerated, but was a reality long before. And that was, improved customer experience and convenience. And I hate to say it, it's the lazy tax that enables people to order, from their couch and receive it at their couch without ever having to go out and do anything in the process. And while that became a necessity in the pandemic, I think there's a lot of folks that aren't going to pivot too far away from those means moving forward. So customer convenience, customer experience, it sounds like is really the driving why behind all of this, and that's not going anywhere soon. So let's dive in then next to the piece, Chris, that you were hitting on, which is the how. You talked about microservices and really building out flexible and scalable platforms to promote. But let's talk about that in a little bit more detail. How is it that organizations are actually going to be able to implement these changes, or how have we seen them do so?
Like Chris mentioned, right, what we're seeing generally with clients is that depending on where they have the systems and how they're interacting with clients, the summary of all this is that every customer that touches any enterprise, any company today, touches them through different channels, right? So we all talk about, of course, the phrase omni-channel, but really the customer's engagement is manifold. It's through a value web, right? It used to be, for example, I've done a lot of work in financial services or banking. The value chain was origination. You get to open deposits or loans or credit cards, then you lend, you do servicing, you have risk monitoring, etc. Now you have to understand as a company, when your customers touch you, whether in a branch or a mobile platform or your website or whatever channel that you're working with, they might be touching your partners. Maybe you're at a retail store and trying to do something, right? So that's where the whole play of ecosystem really we are seeing more and more, and people are awakening to it, right? So there's a whole spectrum of some being so digitally native that they already knew that they had to play in that space. Some other legacy, companies. The ecosystem means that because the interaction with the customer is manifold, you have to see as a company, what is it that you bring best to the table and who can you partner with so that the customer experience still is the true north. You're still trying to say, okay, this is what the customer wants. All the stuff or an employee experience and stuff that I need to do on the back end has to be enabled there. But where's my data? Where's my infrastructure? What is the applications? How do I granularize my architecture to say what I need to expose as part of that ecosystem? And for that piece, that's where the microservices architecture, et cetera, come in. And that's where you have to kind of look at the company today, the company in the near future, and then what will it be in the long term, however you define it, to say what adjustments do you need to make around all these investments.
Yeah, taking a step back, right, about looking at this from a what perspective, as we all know, the three pillars of any organization, the people, process, technology, and the importance of those three pillars in any strategic decision making. So from a conceptual strategy perspective, from an enterprise architecture perspective, it's extremely important to focus on all of these three pillars, all being equally important to put together any kind of digital transformation strategy, digital backbone. And that is the rule of thumb that enterprise architects and solution architects should follow as well. So our experience, Daugherty experience, tells us that a disregard to or a lack of focus on any of these three pillars can be detrimental to success. So
a case in example, promote the two. I think what you are saying, the people, process, tools, and I think Chris, you alluded to it with employees of, for example, Uber being on the fly through some technology that they can be doing stuff. Another case example that comes to my mind is that we were just recently helping a very large electronics retailer. And, they, of course, we did a lot of stuff for curbside pickup in the pandemic, et cetera. But they had college grads, juniors, an 18-year-old, imagine an 18-year-old kid working in a store and walks in someone who wants a, huge screen TV and says, I've got a skylight. The kid would know what to do, but they would have to go to their manager, ask some more questions. So digitally enabling this employee, for example, through digital asset management and making sure whatever was on the website or in the store is available to him or her right there, and with specific questions around what the solution might look like, whether you use mild AI or data, et cetera, would enable that customer experience right away. Not only will it bring productivity gains, but it would enable more sales and perfect customer experience. So looking at the whole spectrum of where you're playing and what enables that customer experience with that lens, I think definitely helps a lot of clients to understand which solutioning to do.
I think what we're seeing too, from a customer experience point of view too, from a UX point of view is, and what we're going to see, I think, a rapid growth, and what we have been seeing a rapid growth in is the explosion of DMPs. So bringing all of your customer data across all of those channels and their interaction points into one spot so we can really understand how customers interact with the brand. So it's not just the shopping information, like, okay, what did they buy? How big is their bag? What's their average ticket size? It's also now, how are we delivering this to them? Are they using curbside pickup? What about when they go into the store? Do they have a difference in size whenever they purchase stuff in store versus when they buy online? And then how do we leverage that data across our partners to understand more? There are lots of platforms out there that can help you bring in data to really and use AI models to do, lookalike predictions and things like that to really start to personalize the experiences. And I think you're going to see a lot more in the personalization space too. There are very few that do personalization really well. Everyone does something. Some of them do it okay, but we all know, there's still, if you go buy something and go on Facebook and you get ads for that thing, it's okay that you missed the point. Like, I already bought that, so let's leverage the data that we have to not show me that. Maybe it's the next thing that I might buy because I bought that thing last. So anyway, data is going to be the king of what drives and I should say behavior is going to be the king of what drives our experience we create.
Yeah, and I think, Chris, that's an excellent point. I think we all know, working especially in this field, or even as a consumer who doesn't really dabble with technology, that data is the underlying, oil, as they call it, for everything. And as you were giving that example, something that just came to mind, we were wrapping up a project with a very famous credit card company, and talk about customer experience, right? Data is captured at POS systems, at, wherever it is, but using it with what this company did was they used location strategy. And what this did was they integrated with small and medium, businesses as well. So imagine this, like you're a Mexican restaurant owner, you notice that this person with this credit card every Friday evening, or typically will kind of walk into a Mexican restaurant, right? We were able to kind of work with small vendors like that and say, okay, for this person, get a specific coupon or a promotion for that day in the morning, where when he or she is thinking about that thing, they walk into the store, and that entailed integration with their POS systems, etc. So there was a bunch of things, right? So they were integrating their backend systems with what the customer was actually just looking to do over the weekend, and come up with the right revenue growth, with the right experience for everyone. So to your point, I think when customers interact with your firm manifold, the challenge becomes that, yes, data is manifold as well, but capturing that and putting that in the right place, and then thinking of the right use cases to kind of, really attack that experience to make it better, is, I think, the name of the game.
When you hit on the use cases, which I think is an important thing, kind of builds on top of what Chris had mentioned, is that an aggregate set of data that's built on behavior, that's built on user understanding and sentiment, is a key to the experience economy. I think another key that was kind of present in some of the things that you mentioned is the fact that experience economy is also predicated on a semi-channel agnostic view that organizations need to take on their customers. And what I mean by that is having a central aggregate set of data is important, but being able to build out action-based, use case-driven scenarios across a myriad of channels is also going to be incredibly important. And as we've seen the onward march of technology over the years, we've seen individual consumers pick up on new technologies at an increasing pace, whether it be moving from television to phone, or phone to cell phone, or cell phone to voice assistants, which I have one behind me, that the number of years that it takes for a certain percentage of the population to take on that new technology is becoming less and less. And so organizations that were focused on, mobile first design 5 years ago are now already scrambling to focus on an architecture or an infrastructure that can support voice assistant technology. So I think it's incredibly important to focus on a somewhat channel agnostic view of the world, and be able to build lightweight experiences around action-based or task-based or job-to-be-done-based types of APIs.
So great conversation. So in order to accomplish that superior experience from a user point of view, from a customer point of view, and also in order to adopt that superior technology in an agile perspective, what is that we need to build, right? What is that digital backbone looking like? So our Daugherty way is to go back to the old school way of thinking, which is built on proven principles and practices and patterns around value-driven enterprise architecture. What that means is mainly, continue to focus and excel in the best practices and proof points around product architecture or business architecture, application architecture, infrastructure, and data architecture, right? All those three dimensions become really important. So if we build a digital backbone and if we build a foundation that can scale, that can support agility, that's when we can think about, supporting, these kind of agile answers to this kind of changing needs from a customer perspective, from a technology perspective.
Right. Well, you mentioned old school, but I think it's really new school in the reality that a lot of organizations that we work with, have not gotten to the point where they have a real strong solution backbone that enables that rapid build out at the experience layer. So I think it's really something that you've got to push the ball forward on and really focus on ensuring that you have a core set of services that really is customer focused. And I think that's the thing. A lot of times organizations design systems that reflect the internal operations of the organization, and to flip that paradigm and to ensure that it's reflecting the outward needs of a particular customer segment is really going to be a driving force behind that.
Yeah, I think what we're also seeing is a lot more opportunity to iterate through solutions. I think, and from a UX perspective, it's really refreshing because, for years, a lot of times we had to just fight to get research to be part of projects. Some customers get it. Some of them are a little bit harder to convince. But now I think there's enough proof out there that doing really user research and doing an agile, iterative, learn, fail quickly, learn, adapt, and adjust. Those kind of paradigms and working environments are becoming much more standard. I think long gone, hopefully, or the waterfall. Let's define the entire project for 6 months and build it for 2 years, and then we'll see what happens. Now it's let's do an MVP. Let's get in there. Let's figure out an MVP. Let's go test that and build on that. Just makes it a much quicker way to get something to market.
One thing that definitely, and I think we all are in agreement with that, one thing that just triggered a thought when you mentioned, the voice-enabled chat programs or smart speakers, working with some clients, one thing I generally see clients struggle with is that, yes, like you mentioned, Pramod, the backbone and the infrastructure of whether it's data applications and business architecture is key to then see what to do in terms of direction setting and pivoting. People get frankly overwhelmed with the amount of technology that's out there, especially even in data. So data to insights to actions is so mind-boggling for every part of the business. We were doing some work with a bank recently, and they were trying to kind of target the Gen Zs and to really have voice-enabled interaction for their banking needs. One thing that came apparent was that data and AI, and I want to just say this, that yes, there's all these use cases that we read, and then some of them are very cutting edge. Sometimes to really do the right thing for the customer and building that digital trust is about small little use cases. Case in example, this bank was trying to kind of manage people's balances, right? So every time someone's balance goes below a certain threshold, you would get a fine or something. They built some kind of rule-based engine to say, okay, at the 23rd of the month, your mortgage goes out. At the 27th, you get this salary. Based on some calculations and seeing patterns, they would just alert automatically saying, hey, you know what? We think you should transfer X amount of money into this account. So small things like that go a long way to really know that the customer will always trust, the accounting, the GL, et cetera. But the real trust is by doing small things where technology can enable that. And that's what leads to, much more growth, whether it's revenue or the experience in itself.
I think that's a great point, because what our job is as, professionals in this space, is to help customers understand what's possible. Like you just said, there is so much technology, it is overwhelming. And we don't expect the customers to understand, how can they use augmented reality in their business. This should be for us to come up and say, okay, what are the problems you're trying to solve? And then we can align those technologies to do those things. And you're seeing, a ton of that, solving problems that many of us wouldn't have even thought about 5 years ago. So I think that's the fun part, I think, of what we do, is that we get to, play with all the technologies and kind of figure out what's going to be the best solution, or think about, is there a gap here? Is there an opportunity to create something new? Yeah,
I think all of us being in technology and seeing the evolution, right? I always feel technology is going to keep changing no matter what, and faster too, right? So when we work with a lot of innovation groups and our clients, we just set up that whole digital watchtower, right? We say, okay, have a telescope function, have a binocular function, and have a microscope function, right? Know where the customer tastes are going, where technology is going at a high level, understand what's happening in and around your industry, and sometimes fusion, because other industries are taking over sometimes. But then make sure that however you prioritize your use cases for delivering that experience, and making those investments somewhat in a roadmap is going to be key. And this whole engine works best when you have all those three pillars established.
Yeah, so from a enterprise architecture perspective, the Daugherty approach is completely aligned with, all that you've been discussing, primarily from a experience perspective, right? User customer experience perspective. How do we support it, right? So I briefly spoke, and I think we are all in agreement about that digital backbone. How do we accomplish that? That's primarily done through two major focused items, proof points. One is channel agnostic API backbone, and same thing applies to the data strategy as well, right? So a data strategy and an API strategy that is completely technology agnostic and channel agnostic, that'll be at the core to accomplish those superior customer experience and all that goals that we discussed about.
Well, and with that, I think we've hit on a lot of really great topics, just kind of reminiscing over the last 20, 30 minutes. We've talked about, focusing on the customer first, looking at the totality of the customer journey, how you can rapidly iterate, bring business agility or agility to the organization by building on top of a solution backbone that is truly channel agnostic and can support all of the evolution of our customer needs, and to focus first on simplicity, those MVPs, things of that nature. So I think those are all kind of key takeaways that we can walk away from this digital roundtable with. And I think that's probably a great way to conclude that we were able to use digital technology to conduct a roundtable, stream it out live to folks on LinkedIn. And so with that, I think we can conclude for today. For those of us here at Daugherty, we want to say thanks to those that are watching on LinkedIn. We hope you have a great day and found some value in the conversations that we had today, and stay tuned for other roundtables from Daugherty.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.